The flickering glow of the Simpson family's ancient television bathed the living room in a sickly yellow hue. Bart Simpson sprawled across the couch, one leg dangling over the armrest, his fingers lazily clutching the remote. It was a Tuesday night in Springfield, and that meant one thing: a brand new episode of Itchy and Scratchy. Come on, he muttered, jabbing the power button. The screen sputtered to life, static crackling like distant laughter before settling into the familiar cartoon chaos he adored. But tonight, something felt off. The episode began without the usual upbeat theme song. Instead, a low, grinding hum pulsed through the speakers as the title card flashed, "The Skin Game." Bart smirked, sounded promising. On screen, Itchy, the sadistic mouse, stood over Scratchy, the hapless cat, who was tied to a rusty operating table. Itchy's grin stretched wider than usual, his teeth jagged like broken glass. With a flourish, he plunged a dull, corroded knife into Scratchy's chest. The cat yowled, but the sound was wrong, distorted, layered with a wet, gurgling echo. Bart leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Whoa, they're really going for it this time. Lisa stormed into the room, her saxophone case slung over her shoulder. "Bart, turn that garbage down. Some of us are trying to..." She froze mid-sentence, her gaze snagged by the screen. Itchy was peeling Scratchy's skin back now, layer by layer, like unwrapping a grotesque gift. The cat's screams morphed into a warped giggle, and his flesh bubbled, regenerating only to be sliced again. The TV flickered, streaks of crimson bleeding across the picture. "What is this?" Lisa whispered, stepping closer despite herself. Homer lumbered in next, a donut in one hand and a beer in the other. "Hey, my show's on!" he bellowed, oblivious to the tension. He plopped onto the couch, sending Bart bouncing, and stared at the screen. "Ha! Look at that little guy go. Reminds me of my old job at the slaughterhouse." Marge followed, her apron dusted with flour, and gasped, "Oh my goodness, this isn't appropriate for..." She reached for the remote, but Bart yanked it away. "Chill, Mom. It's just a cartoon." The scene escalated. Itchy's knife danced faster, carving jagged spirals into Scratchy's body, and the cat's laughter grew louder, more unhinged. The screen pulsed red, then black, then red again like a heartbeat. Lisa grabbed the remote from Bart and mashed the off button. Nothing happened. "Bart, what did you do?" she snapped. He shrugged, grinning. "Nothing. Maybe it's possessed." "Cool, right?" Marge's voice trembled. "Homer, unplug it!" Homer groaned, heaving himself up. He yanked the cord from the wall with a grunt, but the TV stayed on, the image sharpening. Itchy turned, staring out at them, his beady eyes glinting. "What the..." Homer stumbled back, dropping his beer. The can hissed foam onto the carpet, unnoticed. Lisa's brow furrowed. "This isn't normal. It's like it's watching us." Bart laughed, but it sounded forced. "Yeah, right. It's just Krusty being extra weird." On screen, Scratchy's peeled body twitched, and a single word scratched itself into the table beside him: TCH. The hum grew louder, seeping into the walls, and the family stood frozen, mesmerized by the looping carnage. Hours later, the TV finally went dark, or so they thought. Dawn crept through the curtains, painting the room in pale gray. Bart yawned, stumbling to bed, still chuckling about the best episode ever. Lisa lingered, staring at the blank screen, her skin prickling. She could have sworn she saw something move in the reflection, a twitch of a tail, a glint of a knife. At breakfast, Homer scratched absently at his neck, muttering, "Stupid mosquito bites. Feels like something's crawling in there." Marge glanced over from the stove, her own arm marked with a faint red welt. She rubbed it, wincing as it flared brighter. "Oh, it's nothing," she said, forcing a smile. But across the table, Bart's grin faltered. He peeked at the TV in the corner. It was off, unplugged, silent. Yet in its glass surface, for a moment he saw Itchy's silhouette, scratching at the screen from the inside. The morning sun hung low over Springfield, casting long, jagged shadows across the streets, but the usual bustle felt muted, uneasy. Bart skateboarded towards Springfield Elementary, the crisp air nipping at his skin. He scratched at his elbow, absent-mindedly, a faint red mark blooming where his nails dragged. "Stupid, dry weather," he grumbled, ollieing over a cracked sidewalk. But as he rolled into the schoolyard, the sight stopped him cold. Kids swarmed the playground, not running or screaming, but clawing at themselves, arms, faces, scalps, with eerie, synchronized focus. Milhouse stood near the swings, giggling as he scratched his neck raw, blood streaking his collar. "Hey, Bart, it's like the best tickle ever." Bart dropped his board, smirking uneasily. You okay, man? You look like you lost a fight with a lawnmower." Milhouse's grin widened, his glasses fogging as he dug deeper, peeling away a flap of skin. "It's fine. It's funny, right? Like itchy and scratchy." His laughter cracked, too high, too sharp. Around him, other kids mirrored the motion, Nelson raking his knuckles across his cheek, Ralph Wiggum cooing as he tugged at his ear until it bled. Bart's smirk faded. "This ain't normal." Inside, Lisa marched toward the principal's office, her notebook clutched tight. She'd barely slept, haunted by that cursed episode. The halls buzzed with a strange hum, like static from a broken radio. She knocked on Skinner's door. No answer. Pressing her ear to the wood, she heard a rhythmic scraping, scritch, 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 and a muffled chant, "Take, take, take!" She peeked through the window. Skinner sat hunched at his desk, his tie askew, his fingernails splintered and bloody, as he carved the same 3 letters into the walls, over and over. His lips twitched into a grin, but his eyes were wide, unblinking. Lisa stumbled back, her own arm itching faintly. "This is connected," she whispered. "It has to be." Meanwhile, at the Springfield nuclear power plant, Homer slouched. In his chair, donut crumbs dusting his shirt. His neck prickled worse than ever, a hot crawling sensation burrowing deeper. "Gah, stupid bugs!" He growled, scratching until his skin split, a thin trickle of blood staining his collar. Across the control room, Lenny glanced over, his own fingers working at his jaw. "You feeling it too, Homer?" he asked, his voice oddly chipper. Carl chuckled from his station, raking his scalp. "It's kinda nice, huh?" Mr. Burns shuffled in, his skeletal frame hunched and glared. Simpsons stopped that racket and, oh, confound it. He clawed at his dry, sunken eyes, muttering about blasted mites. Homer laughed, a loud barking sound, and kept scratching. Back home, Marge bustled around the kitchen, determined to keep things normal. She flipped pancakes, humming nervously, but her hands wouldn't stay still. A red welt flared on her wrist, and she rubbed it, then scrubbed harder, her nails leaving angry streaks. "Just a little irritation," she told herself, voice trembling. The pancakes sizzled, forgotten, as she attacked her skin, blood welling under her fingers. She gasped, dropping the spatula, and stared at her hands, raw, glistening, pulsing. "Oh Lord, what's happening?" Upstairs, Santa's little helper whimpered, pawing at his fur as patches fell away. That night, the Simpsons gathered for dinner, the air thick with unease. Homer's neck was a mess of scratched flesh. Marge's hands trembled as she served burnt pancakes, and Lisa scribbled notes furiously. Bart shoveled food into his mouth, trying to ignore the itch creeping up his spine. "So, anyone else think last night's show was weird?" he ventured. Homer snorted. "Best thing I've seen in years. Little mouse guy's a riot." Marge forced a smile. "Let's not talk about it, dear." But Lisa slammed her pencil down. "It's not just weird, Bart, it's spreading." As they ate, Bart glanced at the living room. The TV sat dark, unplugged, but its screen caught the light oddly. He squinted. Something moved. A flicker of gray, a twitch of a tail. Guys," he said, pointing. The family turned. For a split second, Itchy's silhouette pressed against the glass from the inside, scratching silently, his grin splitting the darkness. Then it was gone. The itch flared hotter on Bart's arm, and he laughed nervously. Okay, that's not cool. The streets of Springfield shimmered under a greasy afternoon haze, the air thick with the faint buzz of unease. Bart and Lisa trudged toward Krusty the Clown's ramshackle mansion, the itch gnawing at their skin like a persistent whisper. Lisa clutched her notebook, her brow furrowed. If this is tied to that episode, Krusty's the key. He's the one who airs Itchy and Scratchy. Bart kicked a pebble, scratching his arm absently. Yeah, well, if Krusty's behind it, I wanna shake his hand. That was some freaky genius. Lisa shot him a glare. This isn't a joke, Bart. People are hurting themselves. The mansion loomed ahead, its peeling paint and cracked windows, giving it the look of a rotting jack-o'-lantern. Bart rang the bell, and a warped clown horn blared, followed by a hacking cough from inside. The door creaked open, revealing Krusty, or what was left of him. His trademark makeup was smeared, cracking like old porcelain, revealing raw red patches beneath. His green hair hung in limp clumps, and his eyes darted wildly. "What do you want, you little brats?" he rasped, scratching at his cheek until flakes of white grease paint fluttered to the floor. Lisa stepped forward, undeterred. "Krusty, we need to talk about last night's Itchy and Scratchy episode. Something's wrong with it." Krusty froze, mid-scratch, then barked a laugh that turned into a wheeze. "Wrong? Ha! It's a hit, kid. Ratings through the roof." He waved them inside, stumbling over a pile of empty whiskey bottles. The living room was a mess. Pizza boxes, cigarette butts, and a flickering TV stuck on static. Bart plopped onto a stained couch. "So what's the deal? You make that skin-peeling masterpiece or what?" Krusty slumped into an armchair, his grin faltering. "Me? Nah, I didn't write that garbage." He scratched his neck, leaving bloody streaks, and leaned closer, voice dropping. "It came on a tape. No label, no note, just showed up at the studio in a greasy envelope. Thought it was some avant-garde crap from a fan. Figured, hey, fresh content, why not?" Lisa's eyes narrowed. "You aired it without checking." Krusty shrugged. "Kid, my show's been tanking since that TikTok clown stole my shtick. I was desperate." He stumbled to a cluttered desk and fished out the VHS, its black casing unmarked, save for faint scratches that might have been claw marks. "Here's the little devil," he said, tossing it to Lisa. She caught it, wincing as her fingers brushed its surface. It felt warm, almost alive. "We need to see it," she said. Krusty groaned, but jabbed the tape into an old VCR. The TV sputtered, and the screen flared to life. There it was again, Itchy slicing into Scratchy, the cat's flesh bubbling and regrowing, the laughter twisting into a scream. But this time, the image stuttered, and Itchy's head jerked toward the camera, his eyes locking onto them. Bart laughed nervously. "Okay, that's new." Lisa gripped the VCR's eject button, but it wouldn't budge. The hum from the speakers grew louder, a grinding pulse that rattled the walls. Then it happened. A shadow flickered at the screen's edge. A tiny grey figure, no bigger than a rat, crawled out from the bottom of the TV. It was Itchy, but wrong. His body was lumpy, his limbs bent at odd angles, his knife dripping with something thick and black. He hit the floor with a wet plop and scuttled under the couch, vanishing. "What the hell was that?" Bart yelped, leaping up. Krusty cackled, scratching his face harder. "See? They're real now. My stars are free." Lisa stared at the tape, still spinning in the VCR. "This isn't just a cartoon. It's infecting us." She turned to leave, but Bart hesitated, his arm itching fiercely. "Wait. Look." He pointed at Krusty's reflection in a cracked mirror. The clown's shadow twitched, and for a moment, Itchy's silhouette stood. Behind him, grinning, They bolted home, the VHS clutched in Lisa's hands. As they burst through the door, Homer greeted them from the couch, his neck a raw, oozing mess. "Hey kids, how's my favorite troublemakers?" He laughed, a loud, jagged sound, and scratched deeper, peeling away a strip of skin. His grin stretched too wide, too familiar. "Wanna watch some TV?" he asked, his voice echoing with a faint tch. Bart and Lisa exchanged a look. Whatever was happening, it was already inside their house. The Springfield nuclear power plant hummed under a sky bruised with grey clouds, its cooling towers belching steam like a beast gasping for air. Inside, Homer Simpson slouched at his console, his shirt stained with sweat and streaks of blood from his ravaged neck. The itch had worsened overnight, a relentless burrowing that felt like ants marching under his skin. "Stupid rash," he muttered, dragging his nails across the wound until they came away wet. The control room's fluorescent lights flickered, casting jagged shadows, but Homer barely noticed. He was too busy laughing, a low, hiccuping sound that didn't quite sound like him. Across the room, Lenny leaned against a panel, his fingers working at his jaw with mechanical precision. "Hey, Homer, you ever feel something tickling you from the inside?" he asked, his voice light, almost sing-song. A flap of skin hung loose under his chin, and he giggled as he tugged it, revealing a pulsing red mess beneath. Carl, perched on a stool, joined in, raking his scalp until clumps of hair fell to the floor. "Yeah, man, it's like a party in there." His laughter synced with Lenny's, a duet of warped glee. Homer grinned, scratching harder. "Ha, you guys are nuts, I love it." The floor trembled faintly, unnoticed at first amid the trio's hysterics. Then a crack split the tiles near Lenny's feet, and something emerged. A grotesque parody of Scratchy, the cat from Itchy and Scratchy. Its body was mangled, fur patchy and matted with black ooze, its claws elongated into jagged hooks. It hissed, a sound like static laced with pain, and lunged at Lenny. But instead of fighting, he laughed louder, dropping to his knees as the creature slashed at his chest. Thin, invisible threads spooled from its paws, stitching into Lenny's skin, jerking his arms like a puppet. "Look, I'm dancing!" he cackled, his limbs flailing in a grotesque jig. Carl leapt up, not to help, but to join in. Another scratchy thing clawed its way from the floor, its eyes hollow sockets dripping ink. It latched onto Carl, sewing his hands together with spectral strings. "Check it out, Homer, marionette style," he crowed, twirling as the creature pulled him into a spin. The control room descended into madness, alarms blaring as gauges spun wild. Homer, now on his feet, scratched his neck until a chunk of flesh sloughed off, revealing something twitching beneath. A hint of grey fur, a glint of sharp teeth. "Woohoo!" he bellowed, leading the trio in a stumbling, laughing march through the plant, their bodies jerking like broken toys. Back in town, Lisa raced towards Springfield Elementary, her mind buzzing with theories. She'd left Bart at home, too rattled to argue, and now sought the one person who might help, Professor Frink. She found him in the science lab, surrounded by blinking gadgets, his glasses fogged with sweat. "Professor, it's the Itchy and Scratchy episode. It's spreading something," she blurted, shoving her notebook at him. Frink adjusted his bow tie, muttering, Hoy, yes, a contagion of the animated variety, perhaps a mimetic virus with the scratching and the... "Glavin!" He scribbled equations, then froze as reports crackled over his radio. Chaos at the nuclear plant, workers attacking each other with maniacal glee. At home, Bart lounged on the couch, trying to ignore the itch creeping up his spine. The TV sat silent, but the air felt heavy, charged. Marge shuffled into the room, her hands wrapped in dish towels, blood seeping through. "Bart, honey, could you help Mommy?" she asked, her voice tight. She unwrapped her hands, revealing gnarled, claw-like fingers, the skin split and curling. "Back," Bart yelped, scrambling back as she lunged, not at him but at the couch, slashing it open with a feral screech. Stuffing flew and she froze, trembling. "Oh goodness, I didn't mean..." Her eyes welled with tears, but her claws twitched, hungry. At the plant, the madness peaked. Homer, Lenny, and Carl, now a grotesque trio of half-human, half-cartoon. Abominations, smashed machinery, their laughter echoing over the sirens. Scratchy things swarmed the halls, stitching more workers into their dance of ruin. A pipe burst, spewing green sludge, and Homer dipped his hand in it, cackling as his skin bubbled. "Tastes like victory," he roared, his voice splitting into a familiar tch, tch, tch. The plant teetered on the edge of meltdown, a fitting stage for the nightmare spilling out. Lisa and Frink listened to the radio, horror dawning. "It's not just Springfield," Frink stammered. "It's growing through the Cochera." Lisa clenched her fists. "Then we stop it at the source, the studio." As she turned to leave, the lab's TV flickered on, unplugged, showing Itchy's grin stretching across the screen. The itch flared on her arm, and she gritted her teeth. Time was running out. Springfield's streets twisted under a sky that seemed to sag, heavy with an unnatural dusk. The air buzzed with a low, grinding hum, punctuated by the occasional scream. Or was it laughter? Lisa, Bart, and Professor Frink hurried toward the Cristico Studios, the VHS tape burning a hole in Lisa's backpack. The itch clawed at their skin, sharper now, insistent. Bart scratched his neck, wincing as his fingers came away sticky. "This is getting old, Lisa. Can't we just burn the stupid tape and call it a day?" Lisa shook her head, grim. "Not yet. We need to understand it to stop it." As they turned onto Main Street, the town unraveled before them. Tiny, warped versions of Itchy and Scratchy scuttled from storm drains, alleys, and shattered TV screens in shop windows. Itchy's, grey, hunched, their knives glinting with black ichor, darted between shadows, whispering "Kotamais" in raspy, overlapping voices. Scratchy's, their bodies broken and leaking ink, staggered upright, claws slashing at the air. Citizens stumbled through the chaos, some clawing at themselves, others already transformed. Half-human, half-cartoon hybrids with frozen grins and twitching limbs. Groundskeeper Willie raked his face with a pitchfork, laughing as his beard unraveled into threads of ink. At Moe's Tavern, the door hung off its hinges, the jukebox blaring a warped Itchy and Scratchy jingle. Inside, Barney leaned over the bar, his massive gut heaving as he scratched his arm with a broken bottle. "Heh, Moe, look what I found!" He slurred, digging deeper until the skin split. A miniature Itchy erupted from the wound, its tiny knife slashing at the air. Moe swung a shotgun, blasting the creature into a splatter of black goo, but more crawled from the floorboards. "Get out of my bar, you freaky doodles!" he bellowed, scratching his own scalp until blood dripped into his eyes. The Itchies giggled, swarming his legs, their whispers rising. "Kotsa a teo fim." Lisa gripped Frink's arm as they passed the police station. Chief Wiggum stood in the doorway, barking orders at Eddie and Lou, who clawed at their faces with manic glee. "Round up those cartoon creeps, boys!" Wiggum shouted, then yelped as his officers turned on him. Eddie ripped at his own eyes, giggling as they popped free, while Lou scratched his chest until ribs gleamed through torn flesh. "They're so itchy, Chief!" Lou cackled, lunging with a nightstick. Wiggum fired wildly, bullets punching holes in the station wall. But the transformed cops kept coming, their laughter a grotesque chorus. The trio reached the town square, where the infestation hit its peak. Reverend Lovejoy staggered from the church, his collar askew, clawing at his arms as tiny scratchies stitched his sleeves into puppet strings. "The Lord tests us," he wailed, jerking in a marionette dance. Nearby, comic book guy scratched, his belly muttering, "Worst episode ever," as an Itchy clambered up his leg, knife flashing. The statue of Jebediah Springfield loomed overhead, its bronze surface scratched with "Teach, cheat, 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 teach," as if the town's founder mocked their doom. A shadow fell over them. Homer lumbered into view, his face a nightmare, half his own, half Itchy's, with one eye cartoonishly wide and the other sunken in bloodied flesh. "Hey, kids," he boomed, his voice a warped mix of his usual drawl and a high-pitched squeak. He waved a rusty knife, scratching his chest until grey fur sprouted. Through the tears. "Want to play a game? It's a real scream." Bart froze, the itch surging up his back. "Dad!" Lisa yanked him away as Homer charged, laughing that jagged teach-h, 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 the knife slashing the air inches from their heads. Frink fumbled. With a handheld scanner, its screen flashing red. "Great Glavin! The entities are multiplying, feeding on the Kokokokokera. We must reach the studio." They dodged through the chaos, weaving past Mrs. Skinner clawing her scalp into ribbons, and Apu stitching his own fingers together with a scratchy's threads. The studio loomed ahead, its neon sign flickering, Krusty Co., the O buzzing, like a dying insect. But as they neared, the ground trembled. A swarm of Itchies poured from the building's vents, their whispers rising into a deafening chant. "Kosa mais, kosa ateufim." Bart stumbled, scratching his neck harder, blood trickling down his shirt. "I can feel 'em, Liz, inside me." Lisa grabbed his hand, her own arm marked with welts. "Hold on, Bart, we're almost there." Frink adjusted his glasses, muttering, "If my calculations are correct, and they always are, except that one time with the lava lamp we can reverse this at the source." But behind them, Homer's laughter grew louder, closer, a grotesque shadow stretching across the pavement. The streets of Springfield were no longer theirs. They belonged to the Itch. The Krusty Co. Studios stood like a decaying monument against Springfield's unraveling skyline, its flickering sign casting a sickly glow over the trio. Lisa, Bart, and Professor Frink stumbled through the shattered doors, the VHS tape clutched in Lisa's trembling hands. The air inside was thick, humid, with the stench of ink and ozone, and the hum of static pulsed through the walls. Bart scratched his neck, his nails leaving deep, bloody grooves. "This place gives me the creeps, Liz. Let's torch the tape and bounce." Lisa shook her head, resolute. "We need the projector. It's the only way to end this." The studio's main broadcasting room loomed ahead, a cavern of tangled wires and flickering monitors. At its center sat the projector, whirring relentlessly, its lens glowing red as it beamed the cursed Itchy and Scratchy episode onto a massive screen. Itchy stood over Scratchy, carving spirals into the cat's flesh. But now each slash birthed something worse. Scratchy's neck split, sprouting new heads, each one laughing in a discordant wail. The image stuttered, and Itchy's knife paused mid-air, his head swiveling to glare out at them, his grin splitting wider than the screen could contain. Frink adjusted his scanner, its beeps frantic. Hoy! The tape's a conduit, a viral entity using the Kokokokosera as a bridge to our reality. We must destroy it. Lisa nodded, stepping toward the projector, but the machine roared, a gust of hot air blasting her back. The screen pulsed, and Lisa felt a tug, not physical, but deep in her mind. The room blurred, and she was inside the cartoon, a warped Springfield drawn in jagged lines, its citizens frozen mid-scratch, their bodies melting into pools of ink. Itchy loomed over her, his knife dripping black, whispering, "Kocha mais." Lisa clawed at her arm, fighting the urge, and screamed, snapping back to the studio as Bart shook her. "Liz, snap out of it!" Outside the projector's glow, the room writhed with movement. Bart swung a broken mic stand at a swarm of tiny Itchies, scuttling from the shadows, their knives glinting. "Eat this, you little freaks!" he shouted, smashing one into a splatter of goo. Frink wrestled with a scratchy thing, its claws stitching. his lab coat into knots. "Great Glavin, they're adapting," he yelped, flailing a soldering iron. The creatures multiplied, pouring from the projector's lens, their whispers rising. "Kocha ateofim." Bart's arm bled freely now, the itch of fire under his skin, but he gritted his teeth, swinging harder. The door crashed open, and Marge staggered in, her body a grotesque hybrid. Her hands were gnarled claws, her apron shredded, her hair a wild tangle streaked with ink. "Kids!" she cried, her voice cracking with desperation. "I'll save you!" But her claws lashed out, slashing at Lisa against her will. No, I can't stop," she sobbed, her arms jerking like a puppet's. Lisa ducked, tears stinging her eyes. "Mom, fight it!" Marge's face twisted, half her own, half Scratchy's, her grin stretching unnaturally as she lunged again, claws grazing Lisa's shoulder. Frink scrambled to the projector, dodging Marge's flailing strikes. The source, he muttered, prying open its casing. Wires sparked and the screen flickered, Itchy's image glitching as he hacked at Scratchy's endless heads. Lisa clutched the VHS, her mind racing. "If it's a virus, maybe we can overload it, reverse the signal." Frink's eyes lit up. Yes, a feedback loop with the broadcasting array and the Glavin." He yanked a cable, rerouting it, but the projector fought back, its hum deepening into a growl. More Itchies spilled out, swarming Bart's legs, their knives nicking his skin. Marge pinned Lisa to the floor, her claws hovering over her daughter's face. "I'm sorry, sweetie," she whimpered, tears mixing with ink as her arms trembled, resisting the pull. Lisa locked eyes with her, pleading, "You're stronger than this, Mom." For a moment, Marge's grin faltered, her claws retracting slightly. Then the projector screeched and she lunged again, stopped only by Bart tackling her from behind. "Get off her, you cartoon freak!" he yelled, scratching his own arm until blood sprayed. Frink slammed the rewired cable into place and the projector whined, its lens flaring white. The screen warped, Itchy froze, his knife trembling as Scratchy's heads collapsed into a writhing mass. Lisa broke free, shoving the VHS toward Frink. "Now, burn it!" But Bart hesitated, his hand hovering over the tape, the itch pulsing in his skull. I can hear him," he whispered, eyes wide. An itchy thing clambered up his chest, whispering in his ear, "Kosa Mais." The room shook, the projector's light fracturing, and Lisa realized they were at the heart of the nightmare, teetering on the edge of no return. The broadcasting room of Krusty Coast Studios trembled, its walls cracking as the projector's whine reached a fever pitch. Lisa clutched the VHS, its casing hot and slick with sweat, while Professor Frink hunched over the rewired machine. Sparks flying from his trembling hands. Bart stood frozen, an itchy thing perched on his shoulder, its tiny knife pressed against his neck. Blood trickled from the scratches he'd clawed into his arm, and his eyes flickered with something dark, distant. "I looked at him, Liz," he rasped, voice barely his own. "In the screen, he's inside me now." Lisa's heart sank. "Bart, no, you're stronger than that." But the itch was winning. His hand twitched toward his neck, nails digging in as the itchy thing giggled. "Kosa Mais." The room pulsed with chaos. Tiny Itchies and Scratchies swarmed from the projector's lens, their bodies merging into grotesque hybrids. Mice with cat claws, cats with mouse grins, slashing at wires and flesh alike. Frink yelped, batting it, a Scratchy stitching his pant leg. Hoy! The signal's almost ready. Keep them off me!" The door shuddered and Homer burst in, a monstrous caricature of himself. His face was split, half Homer, half Itchy, his donut-stained shirt torn open to reveal grey fur sprouting from oozing wounds. "Time for some family fun!" he roared, his laughter a jagged tish, 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 as he swung a rusted pipe. Marge followed, her claws gleaming, her eyes wet with tears beneath Scratchy's twisted grin. "Stay away from my babies!" she screamed, lunging at Frink, but her claws slashed wildly beyond her control. The projector's light flared, casting their shadows as warped cartoons against the cracking walls. Lisa dodged Homer's swing, shoving the VHS at Frink. "We need the feedback loop now. Overload it." Frink nodded, jamming a final wire into place. "With the broadcasting array and a touch of the Glavin, we'll fry this animated abomination." The projector groaned, its lens pulsing red, then white as the screen flickered. Itchy's knife froze mid-slash, Scratchy's head's writhing in a tangle of ink. But the creatures didn't stop. A swarm of Itchies clambered up Bart, their knives, nicking his skin, their whispers deafening. "Kosa a Teufim." Bart stumbled, clutching his head. "I can't fight it, Liz. He's laughing in here." His grin stretched, too wide, too sharp, mirroring Itchy's. Lisa grabbed his shoulders, shaking him. "You're Bart Simpson. You don't lose to some cartoon rat." For a moment his eyes cleared and he smirked, a real Bart smirk. "Huh, guess I gotta be the hero for once, huh?" Before she could stop him, he snatched the VHS from Frink and bolted toward the projector, shoving past Homer and Marge. Homer swung the pipe, clipping Bart's leg. "Where you going, boy?" he cackled, his itchy eye glinting. Marge's claws raked the air, grazing Bart's back as she sobbed. No, I don't want this!" Bart gritted his teeth, blood soaking his shirt, and dove for the projector. He slammed the tape into his hands, scratching his arms furiously, deliberately, drawing the creature's attention. "Hey, freaks, over here!" he yelled, his voice cracking with pain and defiance. The Itchies and Scratchies turned, swarming him, their knives flashing as they carved into his skin. Lisa screamed, "Bart, stop!" But he waved her off, laughing, a raw, desperate sound. "Keep going, egghead, I got this." Frink hesitated, then cranked the projector's dial. The machine screeched, its light exploding into a blinding cascade. The screen warped. Itchy's form melted, Scratchy's heads collapsed into a bubbling mass, and the creatures shrieked, their bodies sizzling into ink. Bart stood at the center, a whirlwind of claws and teeth, scratching himself raw to keep. Then pinned. "Eat my shorts, you little..." His words cut off as the swarm engulfed him, knives sinking deep. The projector shuddered, then fell silent. The light dimmed, and the creatures dissolved, leaving puddles of black goo across the floor. Homer and Marge slumped, their cartoon features fading. Homer's fur receding, Marge's claws shrinking back into trembling hands. Lisa ran to Bart, who lay crumpled near the projector, blood pooling beneath him. "Bart!" she cried, shaking him. His eyes fluttered open, hazy, but his own. Did we win?" he mumbled, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. Frink adjusted his glasses, scanning the room. "The signal worked. The virus is retreating, for now at least with the Glavin." Lisa helped Bart sit up, her hands shaking. His arms were a mess of cuts, and a red welt pulsed on his neck, but he was alive. Marge knelt beside him, sobbing, "My brave boy," while Homer scratched his head, muttering, "What did I miss?" The studio was quiet, the projector dark, yet the air still carried a faint teach, teach, teach each, a whisper of what might linger. The dawn broke over Springfield with a fragile calm, the sky a pale wash of grey that seemed to hold its breath. Krustico Studios stood silent, its neon sign dark, the projector a blackened husk amid a sea of ink stains and shattered glass. Lisa supported Bart as they limped out, his arms slung over her shoulder, his shirt a patchwork of blood and tears. Behind them, Homer scratched his neck absently, muttering, "Man, I could use a donut," while Marge clutched her hands, the last, traces of claws fading into bruised skin. Professor Frink trailed behind, clutching his scanner, its screen flickering faintly. Hoy, the viral signature's gone, for now at least, with the Glavin. The streets were eerily still. Puddles of black goo dotted the pavement, the only remnants of the itchy and scratchy swarm. Citizens emerged from their homes, dazed. Milhouse rubbed his neck. Skinner blinked at the scratched T-sheech, T-cheech, T-sheech on his palms. Moe swept ink from his bar with a scowl. The nuclear plant smoldered in the distance, its meltdown averted, though green smoke still curled from the towers. Bart smirked weakly. Guess Springfield's back to normal. Well, our kind of normal. Lisa frowned, glancing at the welts on his arm. We stopped it, but it doesn't feel over. Back at 742 Evergreen Terrace, the Simpsons collapsed onto their couch, a ritual as old as the town itself. Marge bustled to the kitchen, returning with a tray of slightly burnt cookies. Here, something to take our minds off, all that, she said, her voice shaky but warm. Homer grabbed 3, stuffing them into his mouth. Ink-free, he mumbled, crumbs flying. Bart leaned back, wincing as he scratched a scab on his neck. Yeah, let's never watch TV again, huh? Lisa forced a smile, but her eyes darted to the television in the corner. Unplugged, silent, its screen a blank mirror. They laughed, the sound hollow but familiar, a fragile attempt to reclaim their routine. The camera panned across their faces, Homer's goofy grin, Marge's nervous warmth, Bart's sly smirk, Lisa's guarded relief. But as it lingered, small details crept in. A faint red mark on Homer's cheek, a welt pulsing under Marge's sleeve, scratches crisscrossing Bart's knuckles, a prickling rash on Lisa's wrist. They didn't notice, or chose not to, lost in the comfort of the moment. The laugh track rolled, a canned echo of normalcy, but it carried an edge, a faint distortion like static. Lisa rose later that night, restless, and slipped outside. The VHS lay in the trash can, its casing cracked from Bart's sacrifice. She hesitated, then crushed it under her foot, grinding it into the gravel until it was dust. "That's the end of you," she whispered, but the words felt hollow. As she turned back, a faint sound drifted from the house, a soft rhythmic tish-tish-tish, like nails on glass. She froze, peering through the window. The family slept on the couch, the TV off, yet the noise persisted. A whisper from nowhere. Inside, the living room lay dark, the only light a sliver of moon through the curtains. The TV's screen caught it, reflecting the room in muted grays. But the reflection was wrong. There on the couch sat the Simpsons, Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, mirrored perfectly, cookies in hand, smiles frozen. And behind them, 2 figures loomed, itchy and scratchy, no longer warped or broken, but pristine, their cartoon forms sharp and vivid. Itchy clutched his knife, Scratchy flexed his claws, and their grins stretched wide, eyes locked on the glass, on the real world beyond. The screen trembled faintly, as if something pressed against it from the other side. The tee-cheech, tee-cheech, tee-cheech grew louder, a scratching from within, and a single crack split the reflection, hairline barely visible but there. The Simpsons slept on, oblivious, their welts glowing faintly in the dark. The laugh track looped once more, distorted, then faded into silence, leaving only the sound of Kokira, a promise unfulfilled, a nightmare paused but not erased. The screen went black, but the final frame lingered in the void. Itchy and scratchy, knives raised, watching us, their audience, as if waiting for the next episode to begin. Somewhere in Springfield, a dog whimpered, a child scratched in their sleep, and the town settled into an uneasy truce with the shadows it could not see. The end, or perhaps just the start, was a reflection away, itching to break free.